In this video, I am going to do one example of graphing a system of linear inequalities with multiple lines to graph. You could have anywhere from 3, 4, 5 that you would need to graph all at the same time. So we're just doing one example because if you can graph a regular system of inequalities, then you can graph one that's got 3 or 4 or 5 that you need to do. Now, I do have a little note down here in the corner. When an equation is in standard form, as in the first one here, x minus y is less than 2, I generally do not solve for y and turn it into slope-intercept form. I have formulas memorized that work out really nicely so that you can real quickly find the x and y intercept. Alright, this is standard form of an equation. I wrote it with an equation as opposed to the inequality. Alright, but when it's in this form, as in the first one here, I know that my x-intercept can be found by taking c over a. So c divided by a really quickly gives me the x-intercept. The y-intercept, if I take c divided by b, alright, then that gives me the y-intercept really quickly. And it's just a shortcut method so that you don't have to solve that equation for y if you don't want to. Alright, so I am going to assume that you've got a little basis here for graphing inequalities, as in you know when you're supposed to use a shaded solid line versus a dotted line, and you've got that grasp of when and how you're supposed to shade. Okay, let's move the graph over here a little bit just so I've got more room to write here. Alright, let's graph this first one. It is in black. I am going to color code this. Since it is in standard form, I'm going to use my formulas here. So for my x-intercept, c over a, 2 divided by 1 is 2. So my x-intercept is 2. Okay, same thing here. Let's see, c divided by b there is going to give me my y-intercept. 2 divided by negative 1 is going to give me a negative 2. Alright, so real quickly there, I've got 2 points. I can do the line. Now, I'm going to look at the inequality symbol right here. This inequality is a less than, which means I need a dotted line when I put this on. So let's go ahead and put a dotted line. That means that any of the points on this line are not going to be solutions to this inequality. Alright, now, I do have to decide which way I'm going to shade, so I'm going to test the point 0, 0, which is common and standard for what we do. We test that 0, 0 point to determine whether or not that point will be a solution. So I'm going to plug it into this equation, plugging x in for 0, y in for 0. So I'm going to have 0 minus 0 is less than question mark 2. Is that 0 less than 2? Alright, yes, that is a true statement. 0 is less than 2. Alright, so what that means is that that point 0, 0 is a solution to this inequality. So that means all of the points on this side of the line are solutions. Okay, again, there's lots of different ways. People sometimes just draw little arrows. Some people do the whole shading thing. So let's just briefly shade on that side because we know that that's where our solutions are. Now let's take a look at the middle inequality. Okay, it's not really in slope-intercept form. It's not in standard form. Alright, it's kind of written as a compound inequality. Alright, all my values of x are in the middle. Alright, in between negative 2 and 4. I could, if I wanted to, break that up into 2 separate inequalities. Let's see, where did I do that? Let's do that right here. Alright, I could look at this as it's made up of the inequality x is greater than or equal to negative 2. It is also made up of the inequality x is less than 4. So that might help you to visualize this as well. I'm going to have an up and down line, vertical line at negative 2. I'm going to have a vertical line at 4. Alright, and this will be everything that's greater than negative 2. This will be everything that's less than 4. So in other words, I'm shading in the middle. I'm shading exactly where that x is. I'm shading in between those 2 vertical lines. So at negative 2, is where I've got to do one line, and it's going to be a solid line. So let's go ahead and put that solid line on at negative 2. Okay, and at 4, I need a dotted line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 4. Okay, so I need a dotted line here. Okay, so x is in between, everything, and here x is in between, so it's shaded everything in between. You can also look at it like this. X is greater than negative 2, here's negative 2, so the numbers that are greater are this way. X is less than 4, here's 4. The values that are less than 4 are here. So that means I'm going to be shading everything in the center of these 2 lines. Okay, now for our last inequality. Y is less than 3. Y is less than 3. Okay, so hopefully you recognize this as being a horizontal line at 3. If that was an equal sign, clearly a horizontal line at 3. Alright, less than means it will be a dotted line, so I need to go up to 3. Alright, 1, 2, 3. And do a dotted line that is horizontal. And now we need to decide which way are we going to shade. Alright, this says y is less than 3, so if here's 3, where's the numbers that are less than 3? It would be these down here. So on the purple line, I'm shading everything that is below. Alright, now again, with all this shading, it has gotten a little crazy, so like I said, some people do the arrows and pointing to where you're going to shade. Alright, but bottom line here, what has happened is the part that has the 3 colors in it. Alright, the black line was shaded on top. Okay, the purple line was shaded below, the orange line was shaded in between. So the part that got shaded by all of them was this part right here in the center. So that right there is where your solution is. Okay, and again, you know, depending on what this might possibly look like, if you were doing this on a computer program where you had to answer questions, you're probably not going to have all of this extra stuff that you do when you do it by hand. They're going to show you a solution set here with either open or closed dots on all of those intersection points right there, determining whether or not they are solutions to this. Okay, so definitely just wanted to get one example out there of how you would graph a system of linear inequalities if you had more than 2 lines on there. And basically, you just put them all on there and keep track of your shading. Definitely, thanks for watching. If the videos are helping, please share with your friends so they can benefit too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks.